The following program is sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts.
About money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your host, Mike Adams, is a registered investment advisor and works with investment portfolios exceeding over $100,000 in net worth and has a proven track record of managing long-term investments surpassing the markets in the long term. The information shared on the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's Mike.
It's Friday afternoon, and we're going to be talking about money. For those of you who went through and remember the dot-com bubble and the dot-com burst, following it, there was a bumper sticker that I saw. Bumper sticker that was one of the most amazing bumper stickers I've ever seen. The bumper sticker said, "Please God, just one more bubble." Well, we may be talking about a bubble today. Many times, very often companies come public and they come public at $10 million or $20 million total valuation. But something's been going on in the marketplace. A company that has a valuation, a private company that has a valuation of $1 billion was so rare, so very rare, so seldom seen that companies with a market valuation of $1 billion as a private company were called unicorns. Something that you almost never saw in your lifetime. That was a unicorn. $1 billion in market cap. Well, today, there's 107 private companies that are given a market valuation as a private company, a market valuation of $1 billion. 107 companies. That's pretty phenomenal. You know, and as you look at the companies that are public, the social media companies, the technology, and so many of those companies that have stories, you see valuations which are really high, not uncommon to what we saw in the dot-com time. You see companies who's got price earnings ratios that are projecting that they're going to double or triple every year, you know? So the question is, are we in a bubble or are we not? And I think my opinion is yes and no. And I want to explain that. I want to go back to this whole idea. There was a book that was written in 1841. It's a classic book for financial advisors, for financial people to read. 1841, it was written by Charles Mackay, called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and Other Madness of the Crowds. Now, a lot of the book is written about things which don't concern the markets, about alchemists and poisoners and some of those things. But the first part of the book talks about bubbles. And it talks primarily about two bubbles. One, the South Sea bubble. In 1711, a guy by the name of John Blunt got exclusive trading rights from Britain to do all the trade with South America. It was even financed by the British government. The British government raised 10 million pounds. Think about it. 10 million pounds in 1711. Huge amount of money. That's like billions and billions of dollars today. And the stock in the company, the South Sea Company, was issued to Britain, to England. In 1719, they needed to finance even more because they had ships going back and forth between South America and Britain. They needed to finance even more. And so they put together a very complicated government debt and private stock offering that they sold to private individuals and to the government. And in 1720, they started rumors about how great things were going. And the stock during the year of 1720 rose tenfold. It increased by a factor of 10 in 1 year. There was a similar scheme to this going on with the Mississippi scheme. It was put together by John Law in France. And as an aside note, John Law was the person that convinced France to convert from coinage to paper money. Now, up until John Law came along, what they had was coins. If you had a dollar silver or a silver dollar, it was actually worth $1 in silver, or 1 franc, or one pound sterling, or whatever it might be. And you know, as I was growing up, my parents and my grandparents used phrases like, you know, there were 4 bits to a dollar or 2 bits to a dollar. It goes back to that time when you actually had a coin. You would have a silver dollar that would be actually physically cut into 4 pieces. And 2 of those pieces were, of course, half a dollar, and 4 pieces were a quarter of a dollar. That goes back to that time when you had coins, which were used as the method of currency. John Law convinced the French government to convert from coinage to paper money, something that we have now. But at that time, it was a radical change. But he also put together the Mississippi Trading Company, and in that sold stock to individuals and to the government, and raised a lot of money. It was trading that was going to be done with the colonies up and down the Mississippi River. And if you remember, in 1803, the United States made the Louisiana Purchase that purchased all that from France. But at that time, in the 1700s, early 1700s, that belonged to France. And the French set up the trading to move materials back and forth. And John Law was the one that commissioned that. Now, when everything collapsed, and there were bubbles, and they would collapse, but before they collapsed, prices were increasing so fast that there's the story about someone that was transferring and selling his stock, and he needed to sign the certificate. In those days, they didn't have ballpoint pens. You know, you dipped it into the ink and signed it off. There's a story that there was a hunchback whose back was used to sign a certificate, and that hunchback received the equivalent of what would be $1 million today just to use his back to sign off that certificate. That's what happened. The stock prices rose. They rose dramatically, and then they fell. And for John Law, it became a disaster because they blamed him not only for the drop in the market, but they also blamed it on paper money. There was another bubble, even more famous than those two, the Mississippi Scheme and the South Sea Bubble. It was called Tulip Mania. Hear it mentioned every so often. It was in the mid-1600s that the Ottoman Empire had tulip bulbs. It was considered a luxury item and very desirable. And they began to trade the tulip bulbs into Holland. And prices slowly began to increase, but it became a speculative thing in 1634. Things really took off. Prices really took off. And by 1635, 40 tulip bulbs, remember what tulip bulbs are, the plants, 40 tulip bulbs were bringing 100,000 florins. Now, the average wage in that time for someone in the Netherlands or Holland at the time, the average wage was 150 florins. So people for 40 tulip bulbs were paying 600 times what the average wage would be. Average wage. If you think today, you know, I looked up the figures for 2013, and the average wage in 2013 for an American was $45,000. If we translate that back to what was going on in 1635, those 40 tulip bulbs would have sold today for $30 million. That's the equivalent of what they were paying for tulip bulbs. Tulip bulbs in 1635 were being traded. A tulip bulb or 40 tulip bulbs were being traded for 1,000 tons of butter. They were being traded for 3,000 fatted sheep, 2,500 oxen. That's what 40 tulip bulbs were bringing. There was a sea captain that didn't know and thought that a tulip bulb was an onion, and he was arrested and prosecuted, and they were going to execute him because he ate a tulip bulb. But by 1636, the following year, things were taking off even more. 2 tulip bulbs were sold for 12 acres of land. And many became very rich trading tulip bulbs. Until 1637, everything collapsed. There were no more buyers. Prices collapsed. And of course, today, Holland has a lot of tulip bulbs. They have tulip fields. They're not worth very much. That's a bubble. Those are classic bubbles, even more so than what we saw in dot-com times. But what we saw in dot-com times had a lot of similarities, and I believe we're seeing some of those similarities happening today with some of the securities that are being sold in some of the private companies that we see that haven't yet come to market, but they will come to market. They will be made into public companies, and the prices will be enormous, just like they were in the dot-com time. When you're valuing stocks, you have a price earnings, you have assets, you have receivables, you have inventories, you have real things that you can look at, figures to look at, and determine what they are. When we went into the dot-com time, a lot of that was thrown away. And I'll come back right after the commercial break and talk about the dot-com. You want to hear what I have to say? Don't go away. I'll be right back after this break.
About Money will resume in a moment with Mike Adams on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Lots of people manage investment portfolios. Just a few can manage a successful portfolio and provide exceedingly great service to their clients. Here's Mike Adams from Adams Financial Concepts.
We believe the price you pay should be based on the performance of your portfolio and the quality of service you receive.
Mike, it seems that a lot of companies subscribe to the one-size-fits-all mentality of investing. Does one size really fit all?
Not with us. Every portfolio that we manage is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. We place our client's interests first in all portfolio decisions.
If you're looking for a home for your 7-figure plus investment portfolio, call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts, specializing in creating and maintaining wealth for over 20 years. 206-903-1019. That's 206-903-1019. Or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Broadcasters in this station.
Now we return to About Money. There's more information waiting for you at adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here again is your host, Mike Adams.
So I was talking about bubbles. I went through the Mississippi scheme. I went through the South Sea bubble. I went through the tulip mania. But we experienced some of that. Not quite to the extent of those bubbles, but we went through some of that with the dot-coms. And usually when you're looking at securities and stocks, you can value those stocks based on what they're earning, what their revenues are. You can look at the growth. You can look at what they're paying out in dividends. You can look at the book value of the company. You can look at the receivables. And you get a very, very clear picture of what the company really is worth. But during the dot-com time, that got all out of whack. And there was a reason for that. Because if you look at what was going on, the internet was doubling every 6 months. Every 6 months. People could see that sometime it was going to be something that was very, very valuable. A lot of people could see that. They could see what was coming in the future. They could look forward and see what we see today with the internet. Some people could see that that was coming, but what we couldn't see was how valuable certain companies were. Were they worth nothing, or were they worth a lot of money? Were they worth a little bit, or were they worth just kind of average prices? To come up with valuations, the big firms and little firms hired certified financial analysts who began to develop a whole system of evaluating .com companies by the number of page hits. They talked about this time is really different. Brick and mortar stores are going to go away. Everybody's going to use the internet. It's going to destroy brick and mortar stores. And toward that end, it did have a big impact on the brick and mortar stores, and it has had an impact. But it wasn't quite the same thing at that time. It wasn't clear who was going to win and who was going to lose. During the dot-com bust, some of the companies that looked so wonderful and had such huge valuations, some of those companies would die and go bankrupt, some within a year. But that was a bubble. And I can remember once being in a grocery store behind two young women, and they were talking. I didn't know who they were, but one woman was saying to the other, you just got to buy stocks. You just have to buy stocks. I borrow money on my Visa card, and it only cost me 18% interest. I thought, at this time, it's time to get out. It's time to really go. Because it became a feeding frenzy. It became so much a frenzy that even on the internet, the word stock was searched more often than sex. That's a very unusual search, is people looking more for stocks than for sex. I don't know if I should say that on the radio, but anyway, that's what it was. Interesting enough, that same thing happened when the Chinese market was taking off a few years ago. They were searching more for stocks. That was what happened, and that was the bubble. It went up, but there were no real valuations. There was no way to value what companies were going to survive, what were going to die. No way to value what were going to be average, what were going to be below average. That was the bubble. Same kind of thing that happened with Tulip Mania, happened with the South Sea bubble. And the same kind of bubble happened in housing. Of course, we remember the housing and the subprime housing market that came down. Houses that were sold based on the belief that house prices were increasing at 14% a year. They were going to continue to increase. There was no way you were ever going to lose money by buying a house. There were people, I sat on an airplane with a guy who was flipping houses. He was buying, at the time, he was buying 6 homes, letting them sit for a couple of years, because if you let somebody move in and had done that early on, the house had wear on it. Instead, he was buying 6 houses, taking out a mortgage on those homes, putting the down payment down, taking those homes, sitting for 2 years, and then turning around and selling and getting over 100% return on his money. 100% return. I didn't take his card, and I wish I would have taken his card because I would have liked to have followed up after the housing market collapsed. But they believed that house prices were going to continue to increase at 14%, so it really didn't matter if anyone had a job. It didn't matter if they had any assets. It didn't matter if they couldn't afford to make their payments, because by the time 2 years came around, if the bank had to foreclose, they'd foreclose and they'd make enough money to get their mortgage back, plus some for the buyer. It was a really nice thing. We had a thing called the ninja loans. Ninja, no income, no job, no assets. Those were the loans that were made. You didn't even have to have any proof of a job. You didn't have to have any proof of any assets. They were called the liar loans. All you had to do is say, I can afford this, and put it down. You had the taxi cab driver in Bellevue that bought the multi-million-dollar penthouse when he was earning $30,000 a year. The monthly payment on that condo in Bellevue was more than the monthly payment was more than his annual income. That was the kind of thing that led to the crash. Eventually, you run out of buyers, and when you run out of buyers, the market collapses. That's the thing that is a bubble. And today, as we look at what's going on, we're in a situation with social media, where we have social media companies which are very difficult to value. What's the value of the data that they collect? They collect all sorts of buying patterns. They collect not just where you live and your address and your phone number, but they know what you buy, what you search for, what you're looking at, all those things. There's a value to that. How much is that value? I don't know. And I don't know anybody who can really put a dollar figure on it. You have companies, you know, the Lyft and the Uber and those companies, Airbnb, those companies that have enormous valuations, I'll say. But who knows? How do you put a value on those type of companies? Some of those will go on because the story is real and it's going to be realized. Some will die. That's a bubble. The thing is, when we had the dot-com bubble crash, we had also companies that had been stable and standard, and those stocks actually went up during the year 2000 while the dot-coms came down, while some people were losing tons of money. There were stocks that were going up. We have today a situation where part of the market is in a bubble and part of it is unstandard. Where we go with this whole thing, who knows? But there will come a time of reckoning for a lot of the bubble companies. The best thing, in my opinion, is not to be involved in the bubbles, but to really go back and look at the values and base your investment decisions on values, not on stories. Anyway, that brings me to my guest today. It's part of this program is to bring you, the listener, to the point where you understand more about industries, more about companies, so that you're ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve, so that you can understand what's going on and the changes that are happening in society, in business, and what's going on. And I think that our guest today brings that with a lot of clarity. She is the editor of D-List, Charity Mainline. Welcome to the program, Charity.
Hi.
And did I say editor?
Yeah, but it's CEO.
Okay, CEO.
D-List Magazine.
Okay, D-List Magazine.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with your background? Tell us about your background.
Well, I grew up in Wisconsin, and I've been writing since a young age. I attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a degree in consumer science, and moved to Las Vegas and started getting involved in publications there. And I worked for a company called Window Media. It has a national publication called Vegas Rated, a weekly called Vegas 7, and then an online marketing called Spy on Vegas. And then I brought an event that I created in Vegas out here to Seattle, and I teamed up with D-List Magazine to market it and produce it. And it went well, and so they offered me a position here as an executive director. And then after working for about a year and a half, I decided to take ownership in it.
So now you have the D-List Magazine.
Yes.
So tell us about D-List, the D-List Magazine.
So it's a lifestyle publication, a premium publication. It's quarterly, printed here in Seattle. It stands for like dress, dine, drink, dance. Everything that we have in this section of the magazine starts with a D. And it's, been around for about 8 years now, but we switched over to quarterly in 2012 when I came here. We do a lot of events that surrounds it. We have a bunch of celebrities that we interview and feature dining locations, and each issue kind of has a special section that revolves, which our next upcoming issue is the Nightlife Awards, so that will feature that.
So let's talk about the demographic.
Okay.
Who's the magazine targeting?
We target about 24 to about 55, very fashion forward, trendy, the type of people that kind of are very social, like to go out, like to try new places, and also kind of like the tech market that is coming into Seattle that doesn't really know what's going on or what the city can offer. So we kind of bring it to them as well.
And so we're coming to a commercial break here very shortly. But as you focus on that demographic, you put that out in what form? Is it subscription? It's
free. We distribute it at very dining places, boutiques, salons, kind of where our demographic's going to go and see it and want to spend the money that's in there for advertising and places that we feature and such.
And it's free. That's great.
Okay.
So we'll come back and talk more about the D-List Magazine right after the commercial break. It's something which really is key to Seattle. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
More about money coming up with Mike Adams on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Your business leader for Seattle is 1300 KKOL.
.net.
We're back with more About Money. For details on what you hear on today's show, visit adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Now, here again is Mike Adams.
So I'm here with Charity Mainline of D-List Magazine. We just started to talk about the demographics, but let's talk about some of the sections of the magazine, some of the features that are in the magazine, and then some of the events.
Okay, well, some of the sections, for our dine section, in our spring issue, we do a food porn list that kind of lists all the best restaurants, eats in the greater Seattle area. As I had mentioned, the summer issue we dedicate to the nightlife, so that's more about the best bars, clubs, bartenders, restaurants in Seattle as well. And then in the fall, we do our fashion issue, which dedicates to obviously fashion and dress, and we also tie in our Seattle Fashion Awards with that.
So let's come back and talk about the food porn for a second. So tell us some of the examples of the companies or the restaurants that won the food porn.
So this year, Best Brunch was Toulouse, Petite in Lower Queen Anne. Best View would be 6-7 at Edgewater Hotel. For Best Barbecue, that was a sandwich, so I can't remember that one.
Best Brussels sprouts.
I can't remember off the top of my head. There's 40 different categories. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, we just have a bunch of foodies that get together and kind of recommend places and see what's best for them. So, another hidden gem was Rigoletto, which is in South Lake Union area. It's kind of behind the Stackhouse. A lot of people don't know about it, but it's super, super cute. So it's a good place.
And good food.
Yeah, and good food. Italian.
And good food.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so let's talk about the fashion issue and the fashion event.
So in September is the release of our fashion issue, which we tie into Seattle Fashion Awards, which dedicates to the fashion designers of the year, maybe women and men, fashion bloggers, and accessory, jewelry, and then we also tie that in with Northwest Hairstyling Awards that we team up with Van Edge Salon here in Seattle, and they have avant-garde, best color, best stylist, and then we do a featured show with them together that features a runway and hair show. So
is there a lot of fashion going on in Seattle?
I think there is an area that a lot of people don't understand. I know that Seattle's seems like it's on the market for the best fashion, but our demographic and the people that we work with are very fashion forward, and they're trying to break through that kind of stereotype against Seattle. We have a lot of designers here, a lot of nice designers that people probably aren't aware of. So
it's not just the jeans and shorts.
It is
community.
not. No, it's not at all. No, there's a lot of Built for Men. He does leatherwear for men, very eccentric kind of looks. They're Luli Lang is a beautiful fashion dress designer. I mean, her dresses are gorgeous. So, I mean, there is a lot here that people, like I said, just aren't really aware of, probably.
And she's opened a shop in New York City, right?
No, she's just downtown Seattle.
I think she opened one in New York
Maybe,
City.
maybe. Sorry.
We'll see. Anyway, I know there was talk of doing that. Mm-hmm. So the fashion... And I've forgotten some of the other areas that you cover.
Oh, so then also, like I said, we do nightlife, which is the dance kind of section of it. We do a lot of music. So in our upcoming issue, we have Sam Smith on the cover. We do Bruno Mars, Iggy Azalea, kind of who's trending at the time. So we'll do coverage on them and, national DJs, local bands. A lot of people present their music to us, and then we kind of decide whether or not we feel it's the best fit for the magazine. We also do like a design section for interior and architectural design, which we just did the Seattle Design Awards this year, which honored that. So we kind of been expanding the design section as well. And then we do drive, destination. There's a lot of sections in the magazine.
A drive destination. Tell us about it.
Drive features an automobile each year. Each issue, may it be like whatever, again, trending with the magazine. Last issue, we did like the Cadillac Escalade. If there's a new design in a car. This issue coming up, we have the Jaguar convertible because it's summer. And then the destination, we pick a destination spot each quarter. Like last issue, we had Austin, Las Vegas, New York. Again, it depends on what the season is and if it's a popular spot to go at that time.
So it seems like it's really catching what is going on in Seattle.
Yeah.
But also giving direction as to where to go, what to do, how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
So it's the cutting edge.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, premium lifestyle. I guess you kind of have to define what that means to an individual, but we just want to reach out to those people. That's a unique niche here in Seattle that a lot of people don't pay attention to. So
I would imagine that most of the payment for the magazine comes through advertising.
Yes, and our events that we do as well. So most of it, but I would say about 75% of it's advertising, yes.
And so it's an advertising area that is really focusing on the people that are spending the most money in those areas. Right?
Yeah.
The restaurants, the fashions,
Yeah, obviously it's high disposable income. Those ones that don't maybe necessarily have to spend money on, expensive schooling for their kids or, it's kind of like the ones that we say, I think it's like an 86% turn rate on reviews and advertisements that's done in our magazine goes to that restaurant featured. It's very like people, like I said, read it because they want to know what's going on and they're going to go and try those places. So, and I make sure the places are up to standard. So we want to make sure we're delivering what's actually good in Seattle.
So how would somebody become an advertiser in the magazine?
They'd probably reach out to me, or we have a link on our website, ads@dlistmagazine.com. My email is charity@dlistmagazine.com. And kind of just say what they're interested in and what we have to offer. Because we do, other than just print, we also have a website. So we have digital and we have a really strong social media push as well. So we can do things through there.
And so what sort of traffic are you getting to the website?
Right now, we're getting about 20,000 unique visitors a month. Page views average about 200 to 300,000. Our banner impressions are about anywhere from 100 to 200,000 impressions for banner ads, and we have about a 0.30 click-through rate, which is actually really good for.
It is really good.
Yeah. So it's pretty good.
So it seems like it's really worthwhile if someone wants to advertise.
Yeah, I think so. I'm very, like I said, I don't really believe in selling the magazine per se, as in giving people an opportunity to be a part of something that's great, and we're going to get your business out there. So that's the main feature for me, and I don't feel like I'm selling it. It's kind of just something that's like, hey, this works. So come and work with me and I'll show you how.
So it seems like it's a win-win situation. It's a win for the readers because they find out what's going on, where it's going on, and what to do. It's a win for the magazine. It's a win for the advertisers.
Yeah,
It seems like it's a win all the way around.
Right. I think so.
Okay. So thanks for being on. Thanks for telling us about the D-List magazine. And for many people, I'm sure that it's the first time they've heard of it.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I hope people enjoy it. So,
okay. Thanks very much. So I want to shift because I went back to a column that was written back in June of 2011. It was a column written by Bob Veres in Financial Planning Magazine, and he raised a number of questions. I think it's appropriate today because this week 4 banks were fined for manipulating currencies. 4 U.S. banks and some foreign banks for manipulating currencies. And the first question he asked is, when brokerage firms violate regulations and federal law, and when they violate it flagrantly, why does the SEC routinely allow the companies to enter into settlements where they neither admit or deny guilt? Why do they let them take a fine when the people who are involved have no penalty, no punishment whatsoever. Even in the case with the banks, the big banks, where those banks manipulated the currency, where traders within the banks manipulated the currency, they paid big fines. I think $5.6 billion total for those banks. It was not the traders who were penalized. It was not the management that was penalized. It was the shareholders. The shareholders had nothing to do at all with that. But that's something that will be written off and taken as an expense. And nothing will go to the traders who were involved. No one will go to jail. We had a financial collapse with the Great Recession. No one went to jail. In fact, Dick Fuld, who was head of Lehman Brothers collapsed and filed for bankruptcy, and of all things that went on, probably more responsible for the Great Recession, he walked away with over $300 million personally. And now he's back and saying things need to be done. But the one thing, when you listen to what he said, he didn't even say, I'm sorry. It was wrong. What happened was wrong. He didn't say that at all. So why do they get away with that? Why are those banks fighting the Department of Labor so strongly? Why are they fighting the whole concept of the fiduciary standard? Now, when the column was written, it was Dodd-Frank, which they're also fighting. They're pouring millions and millions of dollars into lobbying against those laws, to change those laws. For the Department of Labor, I think that the study showed those firms are making $17 billion, which they otherwise would not be entitled to if there was a fiduciary standard. So there's a reason why they're fighting. Anyway, we're coming to a commercial break. I'll come back to this column, and I also want to talk about a book called The Forger Spell, because I think that has implications for investment as well. So don't go away. We got more to do right after the break.
Stay tuned. About Money returns in a moment with your host, Mike Adams, here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Lots of people manage investment portfolios. Just a few can manage a successful portfolio and provide exceedingly great service to their clients. Here's Mike Adams from Adams Financial Concepts.
We believe the price you pay should be based on the performance of your portfolio and the quality of service you receive.
Mike, it seems that a lot of companies subscribe to the one-size-fits-all mentality of investing. Does one size really fit all?
Not with us. Every portfolio that we manage is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. We place our clients' interests first in all portfolio decisions.
If you're looking for a home for your seven-figure plus investment portfolio, call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts, specializing in creating and maintaining wealth for over 20 years. 206-903-1019. That's 206-903-1019. Or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Unbound.org.
About Money continues. Remember the website, adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I've been talking about this column written by Bob Veres. Wrote the column in June of 2011 in Financial Planning Magazine. And looking back at it, the bank thing that came up, but also something else that happened last week. I was invited and encouraged to go meet with Senator Patty Murray to tell her about how bad this Department of Labor fiduciary standard is. I thought, they're asking the wrong person, because I believe that it should be passed. I didn't go. Maybe I should have, but I didn't go. I will write a letter and tell her what I think. But, that's the whole thing, is there's this whole concept of protecting the territory, not doing what's in the best interest of the client, but doing what's in the best interest of the company. That's why they want to fight the fiduciary standard. He also raised the question that big firms hire really very intelligent young people and allow them to use their intelligence to invent new financial products, credit default swaps, repos, auction rate securities, collateralized mortgage obligations, collateralized debt obligations. But when they blow up, no one's held responsible. They allow them to trade currencies and develop currency traders. But when it all comes apart, no one's held responsible except for the shareholders. The shareholders. We've gone through a time when over 10% of the population was unemployed. It was a very difficult time. And yet the people who were primarily responsible for it, no one was prosecuted. Why were the banks allowed to foreclose the homes? They made the loans. It seems to me that something should have been done. Anyway, that was the column, the various column. And I think there's some validity to it. I think we live in a world where there's a lot of lobbyists, a lot of money paid to lobbyists, and it's not always the fairest thing. Now, in comparing it to every other country, I think that we have a pretty good system. But we still have some real problems. We have some real problems in Seattle. We have the third highest population of homeless people. New York City, Los Angeles, and Seattle. And what are we doing about it? I don't know that we're doing a lot about it. We spend a lot of money on bike lanes, and yet we don't spend the money on homeless people. All right, something's wrong with that. Something's really wrong with it. Anyway, I get off. You can tell I'm not a fan of bike lanes. It's not that Anyway, so much for that. I want to talk about a book called The Forger Spell. It was written by Ed Dolnick. It's a true story about Johann Vermeer, the Nazis, and maybe the greatest hoax of the 20th century. Vermeer was a painter in the mid-1600s. Very, very little was known about Vermeer. He's the one that did the painting of the girl with the pearl earring. They made a movie about it. I don't know that I saw the movie. I don't think I saw the movie. But he's the painter that did that. And that painting was almost forgotten for 200 years. In 1881, a little-known collector bought the painting for what amounts to like $200 in today's dollars, or for what would be $200 today. He paid very little for it. There was grime. It had been roughly handled. But that painting was the girl with the pearl earring. And by the turn of the century, that was 1881, but by the turn of the century in 1900, the price had dramatically increased. Today, that painting would probably bring several $100 million, not $200. But in the 1930s, there was a guy by the name of Hans van Meeringen, and he labored to forge paintings, and he forged Vermeer. But in his forgeries, they were not that close to the original. You know, when you're around somebody that drops a lot of names, they're dropping the names of celebrity after celebrity, and they have a whole bucket full of names that they're dropping about stories. The credibility that they have goes away. You know, this was a case where this guy was forging paintings, and experts acquire a feel for the artist. They've acquired a feel for Vermeer, and a feeling that runs too deep for words, but it's subtle. In art, we don't spend our full time contemplating art. But strangely, the closer the forger comes to an exact copy, the more uneasy the experts become, even if they can't articulate why. the closer the painting is to the real thing, the more the experts become uncomfortable with the whole thing. So, and painters want viewers to emotionally get involved. They want them to see that there's needs to be done. And that was Van Meertegen. He sold fake Vermeers to Nazi occupiers, like to Göring and to Hitler. And the experts, all those art experts, and you had tons of them in Europe, all those art experts declared the forgeries to be originals. And so little was known about Vermeer that could be done. And the prices that were sold were very high. Tremendous hoax. It ended for him. It ended for the Nazis, of course. And they discovered a lot of the paintings that were, in fact, forgeries that he had managed to age and make look as if they'd been painted a long time before. So what does that really have to do with investments? You know, we live in a time that I talked about earlier in the program of bubbles. We're living in a time when valuations are very difficult to establish. There's a story that goes along, and the stories have truth to the stories. You can see validity, but you don't see it clearly. You can see that something's maybe not quite right, but you can't put your finger on where the real valuation is. You can see things that have tremendous potential to make a huge amount of money. They're not making much now, but in the future, it looks like it could be enormous. That's the kind of thing that is like the forgery of Vermeer. Very close to the original, very close to those companies that have long histories of making money and growing. They're new, so you wouldn't expect them to have a long history. They're new, and you would expect that they'll have a ramp-up time coming, but you can't quite put your finger on how it's going to all roll out. Those are the companies that are very difficult to value. Those are the companies that get sold on the story. Those are the types of companies where the bidding bids up the price of the stock and the shares to unreasonable levels, to levels where they would have to double their sales year after year after year after year to an enormous amount. And if you look at some of the valuations, and if they were to continue into the future that way, they would be bigger than the GDP of the U.S. It just isn't going to happen. But if you look at what's going on, that's the kind of story that has been attached to a number of companies. They're like the forgeries, but some actually will be real. It's up to us to figure out what will and won't be. Anyway, that wraps us up for this Friday. Have a very good weekend, and I will be back next Friday with a talk about money.
You've been listening to About Money with Mike Adams, a registered investment advisor. If you'd like more information about what you heard today, or about Mike's investment philosophy and strategy, or if you want Mike to evaluate your own portfolio, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com. The information shared on the preceding program was for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. Join us again next Friday afternoon at 3 for more About Money with Mike Adams, here on Money Radio 1300 KKOL.
The preceding program was sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts. Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com. The following program